Nora Wren, 29-year-old fiancée of Dean Calder, stood frozen inside a private dining room while Dean's family watched her hands shake over a prenup she had not been allowed to review with her own attorney. Blythe Calder, 58-year-old mother of Dean, smiled across the table and said, "Sign it before the wedding. My son's $10 million fortune will not be stolen by a gold digger in a cheap dress." Everyone heard it, relatives, family, friends, business guests, and Lacey Vale, 29-year-old best friend of Nora. Dean Calder, 32-year-old fiancé of Nora, sat beside his mother's approval instead of beside Nora's pain. Harlan Calder, 61-year-old father of Dean, stared down at his plate. No one defended her. Nora wore a simple blue dress, the same kind Blythe loved to mock. Her eyes were tired, her fingers trembled, but her face stayed calm. To them, she was only a non-profit worker lucky enough to marry into the Calder name. Blythe enjoyed the humiliation. Lacey leaned close and whispered, "If you love him, paperwork should not scare you." That was when Nora realized the trap had not only been planned by Dean's family, her best friend had known too. But what no one in that room knew was that Nora had already been warned by Rowan Pierce, 45-year-old attorney for the Etta Wren Family Trust, never to sign any marital document without legal review, full disclosure, and a witness to the circumstances. The fortune the Calders thought they were protecting was nothing compared to the private trust hidden under Nora's grandmother's name. While they bragged about $10 million, Nora was the sole beneficiary of a $700 million trust. Dean pushed the pen closer and said, "Just sign it, Nora. Prove you're not after my money." So Nora signed, not because she agreed, because she had already sent Rowan one message under the table. "They are forcing me to sign. No counsel, public pressure. Come now." The room relaxed like they had won. Then the door opened. Rowan walked in, placed his card beside the signed prenup, and said, "Excellent. Now we have witnesses. This is not just a story about a prenup. It is about what happens when a proud family calls the wrong woman a gold digger, forces her to sign under pressure, and discovers the paper they used to shame her has become the first document in their downfall." The first scream came from the stage. Nora turned so quickly that the stack of donor cards slipped from her hands and scattered across the polished floor. Across the elegant hall, beneath a banner that read "A Night for Young Readers," Milo Nash, a 9-year-old scholarship student chosen to read his first poem in public, stood frozen at the microphone. His paper shook in both hands. The wealthy guests near the front tables had gone silent, not with kindness, but with the cold attention people gave when someone poor made a mistake in a rich room. Nora moved before anyone else did. She crossed the floor past white-clothed donor tables, silver centerpieces, and women in dresses expensive enough to pay a family's rent. She climbed the small stage without caring that half the room was watching. Then she knelt beside Milo, tied the loose lace on his shoe, and whispered, "Start with the sentence you love most." Milo swallowed hard, then he read again. His voice still trembled, but it did not break. The guests clapped. Some smiled as if they had witnessed something charming. Nora did not look at them. She only squeezed Milo's shoulder and guided him back to the other children. That was how Nora loved people, not loudly, not for praise. She stepped in when someone was about to feel small. Near the VIP section, Dean Calder, her polished 32-year-old fiancé and heir to the Calder family company, arrived late in a dark suit. He looked handsome, sorry, and distracted all at once. He kissed Nora's cheek in front of the donors. "Sorry," he said softly. "Meeting ran long." Nora smiled because she had trained herself to accept small disappointments when they came wrapped in gentle words. "It's okay," she said. "You're here now." But Dean's eyes had already moved past her. They went to Blythe. Blythe Calder, Dean's 58-year-old mother, and the kind of woman who could make a compliment sound like a warning, stood near the donor wall with a glass of sparkling water in one hand. Her smile was perfect, but her eyes moved over Nora like people inspected furniture before deciding it belonged in the back room. Beside Blythe stood Harlan Calder, Dean's 61-year-old father and the quieter half of the Calder family's public image. He looked pale, though he tried to hide it by gripping the back of a chair. Nora noticed immediately. Everyone else was busy speaking to donors, posing for photographs, and pretending generosity was the same thing as goodness. Nora left Dean's side and walked to Harlan. "Mr. Calder," she said gently, "why don't we step over here?" "I'm fine," Harlan muttered, embarrassed. "I know," Nora said, lowering her voice. "That's why we're going before anyone notices." She brought him water, guided him to a quiet seat near the side entrance, and stood in front of him just enough to shield him from curious eyes. She did not make a scene. She did not call attention to his weakness. She protected his pride. Harlan took the glass from her with shaking fingers. After a moment, he whispered, "You're good for this family, Nora." The words touched her more than they should have. For 3 years, Nora had been trying to become more than Dean's fiancée to them. She remembered birthdays. She sat through cold dinners. She listened when Blythe spoke over her. She showed up again and again, hoping patience would one day be mistaken for worth. Across the hall, Blythe watched Nora help Harlan. Then she leaned toward Marion Voss, a 60-year-old donor whose fortune came from luxury real estate, and said not quietly enough, "She's comfortable serving. That may be useful." Nora heard it, so did Dean. He adjusted his cufflink and said nothing. For one painful second, Nora's smile weakened. Then she looked back toward the children, because children were easier to love than adults who measured kindness like weakness. A burst of perfume and flowers came from behind her. Lacey Vale, Nora's 29-year-old best friend from college and a rising brand consultant who always looked like she had been invited into wealth even before she belonged there, swept into the hall carrying a bright bouquet. She hugged Nora tightly. "You always make people love you," Lacey said near her ear. "It's annoying." Nora laughed softly. "I'm choosing to hear that as a compliment." "It is," Lacey said, but her eyes had already drifted past Nora to Dean. "Dean," Lacey said, smiling wider, "that suit is unfair." Dean laughed a little too easily. "Good to see you, Lacey." It was nothing, a compliment, a laugh. A glance held half a second too long. Nora told herself not to be foolish. Lacey had slept on her dorm room floor during heartbreak. Lacey knew Nora's fears. Lacey had once said Nora was the only person who never made her feel poor, so Nora ignored the strange pinch in her chest. Then her phone vibrated. "Missed call, Rowan Pierce, attorney." A text appeared beneath it. "The trust renewal documents are ready. Also, remember, no marital document gets signed without my review, not a prenup, not a waiver, not even something Dean calls simple paperwork." Nora's thumb froze over the screen. For a moment, the hall vanished. She was 8 years old again, standing inside a public library beside her grandmother, Etta Wren, the quiet woman who raised her after her parents died and taught her that money was safest when it did not announce itself. Etta had worn plain cardigans, volunteered quietly, and never looked like a woman whose private trust would one day be worth hundreds of millions. Etta had told her, real power does not need to enter a room loudly. Let people reveal themselves before they know what you can do. Nora locked the phone quickly, but not quickly enough. Lacey had come up beside her with 2 glasses of lemonade. Her eyes flicked to the screen, catching only 2 words before it went dark. Trust renewal. Something shifted in Lacey's face. It lasted only a second. Then she smiled. "Everything okay?" Nora slipped the phone into her purse. "Just legal paperwork." "For the wedding?" Lacey asked. "No," Nora said gently. "Old family things," Lacey nodded, but her smile no longer reached her eyes. The rest of the fundraiser moved smoothly. Milo read his poem again for a smaller group of children. Donors wrote checks. Photographers captured Nora beside the bookshelves, smiling in her simple blue dress, while Blythe stood several feet away pretending not to watch her. Dean finally came to Nora's side after his mother pulled him into 3 separate conversations. "You were wonderful tonight," he said. Nora looked at him, wanting to believe he had seen what mattered. "With the children, with everyone," he said, "you make people comfortable." It sounded kind, but something in the way he said comfortable made Nora think of Blythe's word, useful. By the end of the fundraiser, the children were waving goodbye and the donors were collecting their coats. Nora's feet ached inside her simple heels, but she felt hopeful anyway. Maybe tomorrow's family dinner would finally make things easier. Maybe Blythe would see how hard she was trying. Maybe Dean would stop letting silence do the work of agreement. Blythe approached while Nora gathered leftover programs. "Tomorrow's dinner is important," Blythe said. "Wear something modest. We do not want anyone thinking you are trying too hard." Dean stood close enough to hear every word. Nora waited. 1 second, 2, he said nothing. Lacey touched Nora's arm and whispered, "Don't worry, after the wedding you'll be one of them." But as she said it, she was not looking at Nora. She was looking at Dean. And behind Blythe's perfect smile, tomorrow's dinner was already waiting with a folder Nora had not yet seen. The pen was already on the signature line. Nora stared at it while the private dining room grew colder around her. Rain tapped hard against the tall windows. Candles shook in their glass holders. Around the dark wood table, Dean's family and their selected guests watched her as if they had been waiting all night for this exact moment. Blythe smiled. Victor Hale, the 55-year-old attorney who had represented the Calder family for more than 20 years, adjusted his glasses beside her. Two men in dark suits sat near Harlan. Nora had been introduced to them as family business associates invited to celebrate the wedding, but she now understood they were not guests. They were witnesses. Nora's place card had warned her first. She had expected to sit beside Dean. Instead, Lacey was seated close to him, her shoulder almost touching his. Nora had been placed farther down the table near Ross Calder, Dean's 34-year-old cousin who hid cruelty behind jokes and called it charm. When Nora first noticed the seating, she had looked at Dean. Dean gave her a small, helpless shrug. Blythe had said, "Lacey understands our family conversations better. You won't mind sitting near the end, will you, Nora?" Lacey had leaned toward Nora and whispered, "It's just dinner, don't be sensitive." But she had not moved. Now the folder was open, and the insult finally had a shape. Blythe slid the papers toward Nora like she was passing a menu. "There is one matter we must settle before the wedding," she said. "It is better to handle these things while everyone is calm." Nora looked at the first page, premarital agreement. For a moment, she only stared at the words, not because she hated the idea of a prenup. She understood protection. Her grandmother had taught her to respect documents more than promises. What hurt was not the paper, it was the table, the witnesses, the timing, the way Dean looked at his glass instead of her face. Victor cleared his throat. "This agreement protects Mr. Calder's premarital assets, including his company shares, future inheritance, family properties, reputation rights, and business interests. The protected value is estimated at approximately $10 million. Ross gave a low whistle. "Smart. You don't leave a vault open just because someone smiles pretty." A few people chuckled. Nora opened the document slowly. Her eyes moved down the clauses one by one. She would waive spousal support. She would have no claim to any home purchased through Calder accounts. She would return jewelry and family gifts if the marriage ended. She could not discuss Calder family matters publicly. She would accept financial penalties if she damaged the family reputation. Her throat tightened. This was not only a prenup. It was a silence contract wearing the name of protection. She lifted her eyes to Dean. "Did you know about this?" Dean shifted in his chair. "I knew there would be paperwork. Did you know they would bring it tonight?" He said nothing. That silence answered better than words. Blythe laughed softly. "Sweetheart, women like you always become emotional when money is discussed privately. We thought witnesses would help." Nora felt the room watching her. She thought of the charity event the night before. Harlan's pale face, the way she had shielded his pride, his whispered words, "You're good for this family, Nora." Now Harlan sat across the table with his hands folded and his eyes lowered. He did not defend her. Ross leaned back with a grin. "Gold diggers hate witnesses." The table laughed harder this time. Nora looked at Dean again, giving him one final chance. "Dean," she said, "do you want me to sign something tonight without my lawyer reading it?" Dean rubbed his forehead. "It's standard." "Is that your answer?" His jaw tightened. "My family just needs reassurance." Blythe did not wait. "We are not letting a soft-voiced little gold digger walk away with what my son built." Something inside Nora went still, not broken, still. Dean exhaled sharply. "Just sign it, Nora. Prove them wrong." The words landed harder than Blythe's insult, because Blythe had never loved her. Dean claimed he did. Lacey leaned closer across the table, her voice soft enough to pretend kindness, but loud enough for Nora to hear. "If you love him, why does paperwork scare you?" Nora turned to her. For a second, she did not see the elegant woman in the expensive dress. She saw the college girl who once cried on Nora's dorm room floor, the friend Nora had trusted with every fear except the biggest truth. Now Lacey was not standing beside her. She was helping push the pen closer. Nora placed both hands in her lap under the table. Her fingers found her phone. Her face stayed calm as she typed to Rowan. "They are forcing a prenup at dinner. Public pressure. No counsel present. No full disclosure. I am being told to sign now. Come now." She sent it. A bubble appeared almost immediately. "Do not agree verbally. If you cannot safely leave, write nothing extra. Let them create witnesses. I am close." Nora's pulse slowed. That was when she understood. Rowan was not telling her the document was safe. He was telling her the room was evidence. She picked up the pen. Dean exhaled in relief. Blythe's smile deepened. Nora signed her name. The table relaxed like a trap had closed. Blythe reached for the document. "See, that was not so difficult." The dining room door opened before her fingers touched the folder. Rowan entered in a dark coat with rain on his shoulders and a black folder in his hand. He did not rush. He did not raise his voice. He looked first at Nora, then at the signed document, then at every person seated around the table. "Excellent," he said. Blythe frowned. "Excuse me." Rowan placed his card beside the prenup. "Now we have witnesses." Victor's face tightened. Rowan continued, "Who advised my client to sign a binding premarital agreement under public pressure, without independent counsel present, without full mutual disclosure, and after being called a gold digger in front of this room." The silence changed. Blythe's smile faded. "And you are?" she asked. "Rowan Pierce, attorney for the Etta Wren Family Trust." Blythe smirked weakly. "A trust? How sweet. Is it enough to buy her own dinner?" Rowan opened his folder. "The trust currently holds assets valued at approximately $700 million. Ms. Wren is the sole beneficiary." The laughter died so quickly Nora could hear the rain again. Dean stared at her as if he had never seen her before. Lacey's face changed first with shock, then with something uglier. Rowan turned one page, calm as a judge. "For clarity, the document Ms. Wren signed tonight will not be treated as informed consent by my office. If the Calder family attempts to rely on it, we will challenge it using the circumstances every person here just witnessed." Victor pushed back his chair slightly. "Mr. Pierce," Rowan looked at him, "you know exactly what this room looks like." Victor said nothing. Blythe's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time all evening, she understood that the witnesses she had gathered to trap Nora had become witnesses against her. Outside, after the dinner collapsed into whispers, Dean followed Nora into the rain. His voice broke. He said his mother had pressured him. He said the company was fragile. He said he panicked. He said he loved her and had made the worst mistake of his life. Nora did not forgive him. She gave him conditions. The signed prenup would be formally withdrawn and preserved only as evidence of what happened. Rowan would draft a fair agreement with separate counsel for Dean. Dean would attend counseling before the wedding. Blythe would apologize publicly at the rehearsal brunch. Lacey would be removed from wedding planning. Dean would never again allow his family to manage their marriage. Dean agreed to everything. Nora wanted to believe a person could fail one terrible test and still become better. Behind the glass, Lacey watched them go. "She lied to you about everything," Lacey whispered to Dean. Dean did not answer, but he did not tell her to stop. And in the rain outside, Nora did not yet know that the next betrayal would not come before the wedding. It would come after it. The whisper started before Nora reached the aisle. At the back of the small garden, guests turned in their white chairs and looked at her with bright smiles that felt too careful. Sunlight rested on the flowers. A soft breeze moved through the trees. Everything looked peaceful, almost holy, but Nora could feel the question sitting beneath every polite face. Why did she still come? Only 5 days had passed since the prenup dinner. 5 days since Blythe called her a gold digger. 5 days since Dean told her to sign the paper to prove her love. 5 days since Nora signed under pressure. 5 days since Rowan walked in and turned the signed prenup into evidence. Now Nora stood in a simple ivory dress, holding a small folded letter in her hand. The wedding had been cut down from a grand Calder celebration to a quiet garden ceremony. No business associates, no press contacts, no long guest list, no grand performance for Blythe's friends. That had been Nora's first condition. If she was going to marry Dean, she would not do it inside a show built by the same people who had humiliated her. Rowan sat in the third row, not smiling, not frowning. He wore a dark suit and watched the ceremony like a man guarding a door no one else could see. He was not there as family. He was not there for decoration. He was there because Nora had learned that love without protection could become a trap. Near the front, Blythe sat stiffly beside Harlan. Her smile was tight, her posture perfect, her pride badly bruised. Harlan looked softer, almost ashamed, but shame was not the same as courage. Nora knew that now. And at the very back of the garden stood Lacey, not beside Nora, not holding flowers, not part of the wedding party anymore. She wore pale yellow and a face full of concern, as if she had been wounded by Nora's boundaries. To anyone else, she looked like a loyal best friend who had been unfairly pushed away. But Nora remembered the dinner. She remembered Lacey asking, "If you love him, why does paperwork scare you?" Still, Nora had not cut her off completely. That was Nora's weakness. She always left one small bridge standing, even after someone had tried to burn the road behind her. Before the music began, Nora unfolded the letter from Etta. Etta's handwriting was thin but steady. "My Nora, love is not proven by how someone holds your hand in peace. Love is proven by whether they protect your name when the room turns against you." Nora's eyes filled. Dean had failed that test. There was no gentle way around it. But he had cried in the rain. He had agreed to withdraw the signed prenup. He had signed the fair agreement Rowan drafted after both sides had separate counsel. He had attended emergency counseling. Blythe had been forced to apologize at the rehearsal brunch, and Lacey had been removed from every wedding detail. Dean had done everything Nora asked. That was why she was here, not because she forgot, not because she was weak, because some part of her still believed people could be ashamed enough to change. The music started. Nora walked down the aisle with Etta's pearl bracelet around her wrist. It was the same bracelet Etta wore when she volunteered in public libraries, even while controlling a private fortune most people would never imagine. To everyone else, it looked like old jewelry. To Nora, it felt like a hand around hers. Dean stood at the altar with tears in his eyes. For 1 second, Nora saw the man she had fallen in love with. Not Blythe's son, not the heir to a struggling family name. Just Dean, the man who once stayed up all night helping her pack books for children who had never owned one. Paul Mercer, a 66-year-old retired minister and longtime friend of Harlan, began the ceremony. Dean's hands shook when he took Nora's. When it was time for vows, he looked directly at her. "I failed you," he said, voice thick. "I let fear speak louder than love. I let other people make you feel alone while I stood beside you. I will never again let anyone make you feel alone beside me." A quiet sound moved through the guests. Nora wanted those words to heal everything. She wanted them to cover the memory of the leather folder, the laughter, the word gold digger, Dean's silence, Lacey's smile. But vows did not erase wounds. They only promised not to make new ones. So when Nora said, "I do," her voice was steady, but her heart was careful. After the ceremony, the reception took place under a white tent. It was beautiful but smaller than Blythe wanted. That alone made Blythe move through the guests like a queen forced to dine in a smaller palace. When it was time for family remarks, Blythe lifted her glass. "I misjudged Nora's situation," she said. Nora kept her face calm. "Not I hurt Nora, not I was cruel, not I humiliated her, just her situation." Blythe had apologized to the facts, not to the wound. Harlan clapped first, perhaps to end the discomfort. Others followed. Then Lacey stood without being asked. Nora's stomach tightened. Lacey smiled sweetly at the guests. "I just want to say that Nora has always been full of surprises. She always had secrets, but I guess marriage means learning to love what you don't know." A few guests laughed softly. Dean smiled, distracted, not catching the poison. Nora did. So did Rowan. Across the tent, Rowan's eyes lifted from his glass and landed on Lacey like he had just made a note inside his mind. Nora's thoughts slipped backward. College, a cheap dorm room, Lacey crying on the floor after learning her tuition balance had not been paid. Nora had sat beside her for 2 weeks, sharing noodles, holding her hand, promising things would work out. And they had, because Nora had quietly paid the balance through an anonymous scholarship connected to Etta's foundation. Lacey never knew. Nora had protected her dignity the way she protected everyone's. Now Lacey stood in front of guests, turning Nora's privacy into suspicion. Later, near the edge of the garden, Lacey found Dean alone. Nora did not hear the whole conversation at first. She only saw Lacey step close enough that Dean should have stepped back. Then the wind carried Lacey's voice. "I hope you know what you're doing," Lacey said. "A woman hiding $700 million knows how to hide other things too." Dean's jaw tightened. "She had reasons." "Or excuses," Lacey said. Nora stopped behind a row of flowers. Dean did not defend her strongly, but he did not agree either. That was how danger began sometimes, not with a kiss, not with a lie, with a sentence left hanging because a man was too tired, too flattered, or too weak to cut it down. That night after the wedding, Nora removed the pearl bracelet and placed it beside her ring. She told herself marriage was not built in one day. Trust could regrow if both people watered it. Dean's phone buzzed on the nightstand. He picked it up while Nora was in the bathroom. The message was from Lacey. "You look trapped today. I'm sorry nobody else noticed." Dean stared at it. Then he typed, "Thank you." A moment later, he deleted the message, but not the feeling it had given him. And outside the window, the garden lights flickered as if something beautiful had already begun to burn. The company was bleeding money, and Dean was smiling for cameras. 3 months after the wedding, Nora stood at the back of a glass-walled conference room inside Calder House, the headquarters of Dean's family company. The room was full of polished staff, nervous managers, and framed photographs of successful projects that no one mentioned had stalled. On the screen behind Dean, bold letters promised growth, legacy, and strength, but Nora had seen the unpaid vendor notices on his desk. She had seen the way his hand shook when private numbers appeared on his phone. She had heard him whisper to Blythe in the hallway, "We just need time." Calder House looked powerful from the outside. Inside, it felt like a beautiful ship taking on water while everyone praised the shine of the deck. Dean finished his speech to the staff with practiced confidence. People clapped because they needed to believe him. Nora clapped too, but slowly. She loved him. That was the hard part. Even after the prenup dinner, even after Blythe's cold apology, even after Lacey's strange wedding toast, Nora had tried to build a marriage out of the promise Dean made at the altar. "I will never again let anyone make you feel alone beside me." But lately, Dean had been coming home later. He was shorter with her. Quieter, not cruel, exactly, just distant in a way that made Nora feel like she was standing outside a locked room with the key in her hand, unsure if she still had permission to use it. After the staff meeting, Nora followed him into his office with a folder pressed to her chest. "I looked over the community partnership proposal," she said. Dean loosened his tie. "Nora, not now. It may help the stalled expansion," she continued gently. "If Calder House partners with the Literacy Foundation and local training centers, you could qualify for education development grants. It would not fix everything, but it could reduce costs and improve public trust." Dean stared at her as if she had offered him a child's drawing during a board crisis. "I love you," he said, "but this is bigger than charity work." The words were quiet. That made them worse. Nora did not move for a second. She thought of the trust under Etta's name. The private holdings, the advisors, the meetings she had attended since she was 21 while people assumed she only knew children's books and donation drives. Dean still thought she was small. Even after $700 million had been spoken aloud in front of his family, he saw the money as something she had, not proof of what she understood. Nora placed the folder on his desk anyway. "Read it when you have time," Dean sighed. "I didn't mean it like that." He gave him a soft smile. "I know." But she did not know, not really. She only knew that arguing would make him defensive, and defensive men often showed less truth than quiet men under pressure. So Nora let him think she had stepped back. In truth, she started watching more carefully. That afternoon, Blythe arrived at the office like she still owned every room her son entered. She kissed Dean's cheek, ignored Nora's folder on the desk, and said, "We need someone who understands image. Investors do not respond to sweet little programs and feelings." Nora stayed silent. Dean rubbed his jaw. "I'm looking into options." Blythe smiled toward the office door. "I already found one." Lacey walked in. She wore a cream blazer, carried a leather portfolio, and smiled like she had been invited into a place she had always deserved. Dean looked surprised, but not unhappy. Nora felt the air leave the room slowly. "Lacey?" she asked. Lacey's smile softened into something almost innocent. "Blythe asked me to consult on brand recovery. Just temporary, I hope that's not awkward." Temporary was a word people used when they wanted permission to stay. Dean looked at Nora. "She understands the image we need." There it was again. The quiet replacement. Nora understood children, donors, books, kindness, small rooms, and broken people. Lacey understood image. Blythe understood power. Dean understood pressure. And Nora apparently understood too little to be useful. Over the next few weeks, Lacey became part of Calder House so smoothly it seemed planned. She stayed late for strategy sessions. She walked beside Dean to meetings. She knew when he skipped lunch. She brought him coffee exactly how he liked it. Nora noticed all of it. She also noticed that Lacey never acted too close when Nora was near. That was the clever part. Lacey did not cross lines in daylight. She only blurred them. One night, Nora sat alone in a conference room waiting for Dean to finish a call. Through the glass wall, she saw him laughing with Lacey near the copy room. It was not the laugh he gave investors. It was not the tired laugh he gave Nora at home. It was young, free. Lacey touched his sleeve just once, and Dean did not move away. Nora looked down at her wedding ring and forced herself to breathe. Across the hall, Lacey's voice drifted through the cracked door. "Nora may be rich," Lacey said, "but she'll never understand pressure. She inherited safety. You have to earn yours." Dean did not correct her. He only looked away, wounded in the exact place Lacey had aimed. That was Lacey's gift. She knew where people felt small, then stood beside the wound pretending to protect it. Nora later learned, in pieces, why Lacey was so good at pretending. She had grown up close enough to wealth to study it, but never close enough to feel secure inside it. She had learned the right forks, the right shoes, the right laugh at expensive tables. In college, she envied Nora because Nora never chased approval. Lacey thought life simply loved Nora more. After the prenup reveal, envy had become something sharper. Nora had money, Dean, a name, a place at the table. To Lacey, that felt unfair. That evening, Nora's phone rang as she left the office. Rowan's voice was calm but heavy. The Calder company's debt structure is worse than they admitted before the wedding. Keep records of any request Dean makes involving your trust. Nora stopped near the parking entrance. Do you think he married me for the trust? Rowan was quiet for a moment. I think people under pressure reveal themselves. Nora closed her eyes. She wanted him to say no. She wanted someone wise and certain to tell her she was being afraid for nothing. Instead, Rowan gave her truth without comfort. From that day on, Nora saved emails. She photographed documents left open on Dean's desk when they involved her name or the trust. She wrote down dates, late meetings, strange payments, and every time Lacey's name appeared where it did not belong. She was not planning revenge. Not yet. She was trying to understand whether her marriage was sick or already dead. One rainy night, Dean texted that he would be late again. Board prep. Don't wait up. Nora did wait. Then she packed dinner into a paper bag and drove to Calder House. The building was mostly dark, except for Dean's floor. She stepped out of the elevator quietly and walked toward the glow at the end of the hall. Through the glass wall, she saw them. Dean and Lacey stood inside his office. They were not kissing. They were not touching. But Lacey was wearing Dean's suit jacket around her shoulders, and Dean was smiling at her in a way Nora had not seen in weeks. Nora opened the door. Lacey turned first. Oh, she said softly, we didn't hear you. Dean pulled the jacket from Lacey's shoulders too quickly, and Nora knew that whatever had not happened yet was already on its way. The second guest called Lacey his wife. Nora heard it clearly from beside the champagne table. A grey-haired donor reached for Dean's hand, smiled at Lacey in her silver dress, and said, Your wife has done a beautiful job with the gala. She knows exactly how to make this family look strong. For one sharp second, the room went silent inside Nora's chest. Dean's smile froze. Lacey laughed first. Oh, that's kind, she said, touching Dean's arm as if correcting the man would be rude. Dean opened his mouth, then looked across the ballroom and saw Nora watching. This is Lacey, he said quickly, our brand consultant. The donor blinked. My apologies. Lacey smiled like forgiveness was hers to give. Nora stood still in her simple black dress while the Calder Gala moved around her in bright lights and soft music. It was supposed to be a charity event for business scholarships, hosted by Calder House to rebuild public trust. Dean had told her this night mattered. He had said investors needed to see unity, but unity apparently did not mean wife. It meant image. And tonight, Lacey looked like the image they wanted. She stayed close to Dean near the stage. She adjusted his tie before his speech. She reminded him of names. She placed one hand on his back when he laughed. She moved like she belonged to the room, to the company, to him. Nora noticed everything. So did Blythe. Blythe stood near a tall floral arrangement, watching Lacey guide Dean through the crowd. Her smile was small, pleased, almost relieved. Months earlier, she had called Nora gold digger because she thought Nora had no money. Now she knew Nora had more wealth than the Calder family could imagine, but it had not made her kinder. It had only made her more careful. Blythe approached Nora with a glass in her hand. Lacey has been very good for Dean's confidence, she said. You can't understand what he carries. Nora kept her voice even. I carry more than you know. Blythe's smile thinned. That is exactly the problem. Women with secrets make dangerous wives. The words slipped under Nora's skin, but she did not let them show. Once, Blythe had thought Nora was too poor for Dean. Now she thought Nora was too powerful. The judgment had changed clothes, but it was still the same judgment. Across the ballroom, Dean laughed at something Lacey whispered. A photographer lifted his camera. Lacey leaned in close. The flash caught them before Dean moved away. Nora felt the first clean piece of truth settle inside her. This was not confusion anymore. It was a pattern. She remembered the office, Lacey wearing Dean's suit jacket. She remembered the wedding text Dean deleted too late. She remembered Lacey's toast about secrets. She remembered the prenup dinner when her best friend did not defend her but helped push the pen closer. Nora had wanted those moments to be separate. They were not. They were a trail. Later that evening, Dean was introduced to another investor. This man looked at Lacey, then back at Dean and said, "And this must be Mrs. Calder." Dean laughed softly. Nora waited. This time, he did not correct him. He only shifted the conversation toward the company's expansion plan. Lacey's hand stayed on his arm. Blythe saw it and smiled. Nora turned away before anyone could see her face change. She walked toward the side hallway, needing air, needing silence, needing one moment where she did not have to pretend she was not being erased in public. Then she heard Lacey's voice. "She made you look small at that dinner. Everyone remembers it." Nora stopped. Dean's voice came lower. She didn't make me look small, my mother did. Lacey stepped closer. Nora could see them through the narrow gap between two open doors. But Nora let her attorney humiliate you, Lacey said. She could have stopped him. She wanted everyone to know she was above you. Dean said nothing. Lacey softened her voice. I would never do that to you. There it was, not a kiss, not a confession, something more dangerous. An offer. Lacey was not simply flirting with Dean. She was building a place for him to hide from the shame he refused to face. She was making Nora's self-protection look like betrayal, and her own betrayal look like comfort. Nora stepped back before they saw her. In the restroom, she gripped the marble sink and tried to breathe. The woman in the mirror looked calm, but her eyes had changed. The door opened. Lacey came in. For a moment, they looked at each other through the mirror, and years of friendship stood between them like a body neither wanted to name. Nora turned. Are you in love with my husband? Lacey's mouth parted, then curved into a wounded smile. Nora, this is what I mean, she said. You think because you have money, everyone wants what's yours. The sentence cut deep because Lacey knew better. Nora had never treated her like less, never used money to shame her, never told her about the tuition she had quietly paid years ago, never asked for gratitude. She had protected Lacey's pride the same way she once protected Harlan's, and now Lacey was using Nora's hidden wealth to make her look suspicious, possessive, and cruel. Nora stared at her. You didn't answer my question. Lacey looked away first. That was answer enough. Something inside Nora did not explode. It closed. The friend was gone. What stood in front of her was an enemy wearing old memories. After the gala ended, Nora sat alone in her car and called Rowan. I need to know whether Dean is using company accounts to hide anything, she said. Rowan did not sound surprised. Then we do this properly. No emotion, no accusations, records first. I don't want drama. Good, Rowan said. Drama warns people, evidence traps them. He told her to document dates, save messages, and avoid direct confrontation until they had proof. Recommended a licensed private investigator and a forensic accountant to review any company-linked expenses that touched Dean, Lacey, or the Calder accounts. Nora closed her eyes. This was not revenge yet. It was survival with a paper trail. That night, Dean came home late. Nora was awake, sitting in the dark living room with one lamp on. He kissed her forehead. Investor drinks ran long. She smelled expensive cologne, not his. Successful night, she asked. Important night, he said. Then he went upstairs to shower. Nora picked up his jacket from the chair. She did not search it wildly. She simply folded it the way she always did. Something small fell from the pocket and struck the floor. A silver earring. Nora bent and picked it up. It was not hers. It matched Lacey's silver dress from the gala. For a long moment, Nora held it in her palm while the shower ran upstairs. Then she walked to her desk, took out a small envelope, placed the earring inside, and wrote one word across the front. Evidence. And for the first time since marrying Dean, Nora stopped wondering whether she was losing him and began preparing for what he had already chosen. Continuing from your uploaded script and the revised setup already completed. The hotel door was not fully latched. Nora stood in the quiet corridor with rain sliding down the windows behind her and a folder of photographs pressed against her chest. Her fingers were cold, but her face was calm. Inside the room, Dean's voice came low and familiar, followed by Lacey's soft laugh. That laugh hurt more than the hotel receipt, more than the silver earring, more than the 2 weeks of reports now sitting in Nora's hands. Because once, that laugh had belonged to late nights in a college dorm, cheap noodles, borrowed sweaters, and a girl who told Nora she was the only person who never made her feel poor. Now it came from behind a hotel door with Nora's husband. Malcolm Reed, a 48-year-old licensed private investigator hired by Rowan to document Dean's movements without crossing legal lines, had called 20 minutes earlier. Malcolm was a former insurance fraud investigator, calm and exact, the kind of man who wrote facts down before emotion could touch them. Mrs. Calder, he had said, your husband entered the hotel at 7:12 p.m. Ms. Vale arrived 11 minutes later. Same room. I have time-stamped photographs from public areas only. I suggest you call your attorney before you do anything. Nora had called Rowan. His advice had been simple. Do not force entry. Do not threaten anyone. Do not touch anything that is not yours. If they open the door, observe. If you see documents involving your trust, photograph only what is visible, then leave. So she came, not to scream, not to fight, to see the truth before anyone could repaint it. For 2 weeks, Malcolm had followed the trail Dean left behind. Dean told Nora he had investor dinners, but he met Lacey at hotels. He paid for rooms using a company card marked as client hospitality. He bought Lacey jewelry through a vendor account. He approved consulting bonuses to Lacey without matching work reports. He allowed her to sit in strategy meetings that included Calder debt, investor fears, and Nora's name. And worst of all, he had discussed Nora's trust. Not Nora's heart, not Nora's marriage, her trust. The affair was no longer only a betrayal of love. It was becoming a doorway into money. Nora stood outside the room and listened. The door had caught against the metal safety latch, leaving only a narrow gap. She did not touch it. She did not push it. She only stood still while their voices drifted into the corridor. Lacey's voice came soft and sure. After the anniversary dinner, she'll be too embarrassed to fight. Your mother knows exactly how to corner her. Dean sounded tired. Nora won't make a scene. Lacey laughed again. That's why she loses. For a second, Nora forgot to breathe. It was not the cheating alone that broke the last piece of her hope. It was the certainty in their voices. They knew her kindness. They knew her restraint. They had studied the soft places in her and mistaken them for openings. Nora lifted her hand and knocked once. The room went silent. A second passed, then another. Dean opened the door. He was still in his dress shirt from the office, sleeves rolled, collar loose, face emptying of color the moment he saw her. Behind him, Lacey stood near the window wearing the same silver earrings Nora had seen at the gala. One earring was missing. The other shone under the hotel light like a confession. No one moved. The room smelled of expensive perfume, rain, and lies. Nora, Dean said, stepping into the doorway. Wait, this is... Do not insult me twice, Nora said. Her voice was so quiet that both of them stopped. Dean looked at the folder in her hand. His eyes changed. Understood then that this was not suspicion. It was evidence. Lacey recovered first because shame would have made her small, and Lacey had spent her whole life running from smallness. She lifted her chin. You were never right for him. Nora looked at her former best friend. Lacey continued, sharper now. You were just rich enough to scare him. Dean whispered Lacey stop, but he had never stopped her when it mattered. Nora looked at Dean. How long? Dean swallowed. It's not what you think. That answer is for people who still need convincing. His mouth closed. Nora turned back to Lacey. You think this started because I had money? Lacey folded her arms. Didn't it? Nora's chest tightened, not with anger but with grief. A memory opened inside her. College. A cold room. Lacey sitting on the floor with a paper cup of noodles in her hands, crying because her tuition balance was overdue. She had been humiliated, terrified. Too proud to ask for help. Nora had sat beside her all night. Lacey had whispered, You're the only person who never makes me feel poor. The next morning, Nora had called one of Etta's foundation officers and arranged an anonymous scholarship payment. Lacey never knew. Nora never told her because friendship, to Nora, was supposed to protect dignity, not purchase gratitude. Now Nora looked at the woman who had repaid that protection by trying to replace her. I paid your tuition balance senior year, Nora said. Lacey's face changed. Nora did not raise her voice. You cried in my arms for a week, and I never told you because I did not want you to feel small. The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. Lacey opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time that night, she looked truly exposed. Dean stared at Nora like he was only now realizing how much of her life had existed beyond his understanding, not just wealth. Character, mercy, quiet choices he had never bothered to see. Nora, he said, softer now, I made a mistake. No, she said, a mistake is one lie, this took planning. He flinched. She opened the folder and let a few photographs slide into view. Hotel entrances, dinner receipts, jewelry invoices, company card summaries, payment approvals with Lacey's name attached. Dean looked at them, then at her. His mouth moved, but no defense came. Nora pulled out her phone and called Rowan. He answered on the first ring. She's with him, Nora said. Rowan's voice sharpened. Are you safe? Yes. Then leave, we have enough for the marital case, do not argue. Nora almost turned to go. Then she saw Dean's briefcase on the desk behind him. It was open. Inside lay a draft document with a clean title page, Postnuptial Asset Integration Proposal. Her body went cold. This was not just an affair. This was a plan. She did not enter the room. She only lifted her phone from the doorway and photographed the visible title page. Dean saw her. Nora, he said quickly, don't. For the first time since she arrived, he looked afraid, not afraid of losing her, afraid of what she had found. And as Nora lowered the phone, she understood that the hotel room was only the surface of the betrayal. The first file Rowan opened had Dean's signature on it. Nora sat across from him in the attorney conference room, her hands folded so tightly her knuckles had lost color. The table between them was covered with copies of bank records, printed emails, hotel receipts, company ledgers, text screenshots, and photographs from Malcolm's investigation. Outside the tall windows, the morning was grey. Inside the room, Nora's marriage was being taken apart one document at a time. Rowan did not soften the truth. That was one thing Nora trusted about him. He never made a wound prettier than it was. He placed the first receipt in front of her. Hotel room, paid with a Calder company card and coded as client hospitality. Then another, jewelry invoice, processed through a vendor account. Then a transfer record, consulting bonus to Lacey Vale, no attached work report in the records we have. Nora stared at Lacey's name on the page. It looked clean in print. Professional, harmless, but Nora had seen that same name glowing on Dean's phone. She had seen it on gala schedules, strategy folders, hotel records, and now company payments. Lacey had not only entered Nora's marriage, she had entered the money trail. Beside Rowan sat Celia Ma, a 46-year-old forensic accountant hired by Rowan to review only the records Nora legally possessed and identify what should be requested through formal discovery. She wore reading glasses and spoke in a calm, careful voice, like every sentence had been checked twice before leaving her mouth. The company's public value was presented around 10 million, Celia said, sliding a financial summary toward Nora. But that number is generous. It includes projected contracts that never closed, properties tied to debt, and assets already pledged as loan security. Nora looked up. So the $10 million fortune they wanted to protect was mostly reputation, Celia said, not liquid wealth, not stability. Malcolm sat near the wall with his own folder, and the pressure was increasing. Unpaid vendors, delayed payments, a loan covenant issue, they needed outside money quickly. Nora's throat tightened. The prenup dinner came back to her in pieces, Blythe's smile, Ross laughing, Dean saying, just sign it, prove them wrong. They had acted like she was trying to steal from them. But all along, they had been standing in front of a sinking ship, calling it a castle. Rowan opened another folder. This is where the affair connects to the financial scheme. He turned a page and showed Nora screenshots of messages Dean had sent from his personal email to an account Lacey used for Calder Consulting. One message from Dean said, "If Nora invests as my wife, not as a lender, we can avoid outside control." Nora read it twice. The words blurred, then sharpened. "Not my wife is hurting, not I betrayed her, not I need to fix this, just a plan to make her trust money easier to reach." Celia placed another document beside it. The draft postnuptial agreement you photographed at the hotel references a joint investment vehicle connected to Calder House. We cannot say yet who drafted the final language, but the structure is clear. Nora's face stayed still, but the room felt colder. Said, in simple language, they wanted to move trust-backed funds close enough for Dean to use while keeping the emotional pressure inside the marriage. Nora looked at him. "They were going to ask me after I caught them?" "No," Rowan said. "They were hoping you would not catch them until after they cornered you publicly." He handed her 2 printed emails. The first was from Lacey to Blythe. "If Nora feels isolated enough, she'll pay to keep the marriage. She doesn't like public embarrassment." The second was Blythe's reply. "Then we embarrass her publicly." Again, Nora stopped breathing for a moment. Again, that word made everything connect. The prenup dinner had not been a mistake made by proud people. It had been a method, public pressure, witnesses, shame, a table full of eyes. A woman cornered into proving love by giving something away. They were going to do it again. Only this time they did not want her signature on a prenup. They wanted access to the trust. Nora leaned back in her chair. She did not cry. She had passed crying somewhere between the hotel door and the first receipt. Instead, she felt a deep, quiet grief, the kind that did not shake the body, the kind that changed it. "Was any of it real?" she asked. Rowan's eyes softened. "I cannot answer that as your attorney." Nora looked down at her wedding ring. "But as someone who knew my grandmother," the room went still. Rowan closed the folder slowly. "Your grandmother feared this exact kind of family." That answer hurt worse than a no, because Etta had seen the danger before Nora did. Etta had built walls around the trust. She had insisted on attorneys, documents, privacy, separate assets, and patience, not because she did not believe in love, but because she understood how greed could dress itself as family. Nora remembered Etta's voice in the library. "Let people reveal themselves before they know what you can do." Now they had. And Nora wished, with a childlike ache, that she could go back and tell her grandmother she had been right. Rowan let the silence sit for a few seconds, then moved to the legal plan. "We file for divorce based on infidelity and financial misconduct. We ask the court to preserve relevant records. We notify the Calder board through counsel about unauthorized payments. We freeze any attempt to access or pledge trust-related assets. We cancel all trust-linked funding discussions. And we prepare a public statement only if they attack you first. Nora listened carefully. No screaming, no threats, no dramatic warning. That would only help Dean prepare. No shouting, she said. Rowan nodded. No begging. No warning them. Rowan's expression turned almost proud. Then we let their own documents speak. For the first time that morning, Nora felt something besides grief. Not joy, not revenge, control. The kind of control that came from standing still while the truth gathered around you like an army. Rowan reached into the final folder. There is one more thing. He placed a guest list in front of her. At the top was the name of the upcoming Calder House anniversary dinner. Blythe had invited investors, board members, family friends, and several press contacts. Dean was scheduled to speak about loyalty, legacy, and future growth. Lacey was listed as brand consultant. And near the bottom, under special recognition, was Nora's name. Nora read it once, then again. Rowan said, "They are planning to use you one more time." Nora closed the folder gently. Her voice was quiet when she answered. "Good." Rowan watched her. Nora stood, her wedding ring catching the grey light. "Then everyone who helped bury me can watch me stand up." And somewhere across town, invitations were already being accepted for a dinner that would not end the way Blythe planned. The room was already applauding before Nora even entered. Dean stood on the ballroom stage beneath a large gold banner that read Calder House Anniversary Dinner. His smile was bright. His suit was perfect. His voice carried through the speakers with the warm confidence of a man who believed the room still belonged to him. "My wife has been my quiet strength," he said. The applause rose again. At the ballroom entrance, Nora stopped. For 1 second, she could not move, not because she was afraid of Dean, not because she feared Blythe, not even because Lacey sat near the front table in a silver dress, looking calm and polished, as if she had not helped tear open Nora's marriage. Nora stopped because Dean had used the exact part of her he had betrayed. Her quiet, her patience, her refusal to make scenes. He had turned her pain into a line for investors. Beside Nora stood Rowan carrying a black folder. Celia stood a few steps behind him with a slim case of reviewed financial records. Neither of them rushed her. They understood this was not only legal, it was personal. The ballroom glowed with golden lights. White flowers covered the tables. Board members sat near the stage. Family friends whispered over wine glasses. Investors watched Dean with careful smiles, waiting to hear whether Calder House still had a future. Blythe moved through the room like a woman who had already won. She wore deep emerald and diamonds, her chin high, her smile sharp. When she saw Nora, her face brightened with false warmth. "There she is," Blythe said into the microphone as Dean stepped aside. "The woman of the evening." Nora felt every eye turn toward her. It was the same feeling as the prenup dinner. A room, a table, a family using witnesses like weapons. But this time, Nora had not come alone. Blythe continued, "Nora has become part of the Calder legacy, and tonight we look forward to her standing with us financially as well as emotionally." The room applauded. Dean held out his hand from the stage. Lacey watched closely, her lips curved in the smallest smile. They thought Nora would walk up, smile, and save them. They believed she would protect the marriage because she had protected people all her life. They believed she would protect Dean's image because she had never embarrassed him in public. They believed she would protect the Calder name because she had once wanted to belong to it. They were wrong. Nora walked to the stage slowly. She did not take Dean's hand. She took the microphone. The applause faded. For a moment, she looked across the room. She saw Harlan near the front, his face pale again. She saw Ross whispering to a board member. She saw Lacey's fingers tighten around her glass. She saw Blythe's smile begin to harden. Then Nora spoke. "I learned before my wedding that the Calder family values documents," she said. "So tonight, out of respect for their tradition, I brought documents too." The silence fell instantly. Dean's smile disappeared. "Nora," he whispered, still trying to sound gentle. "What are you doing?" She did not look at him. Rowan stepped forward. His voice was calm, professional, and impossible to dismiss. "Because Mrs. Calder has been publicly introduced tonight as a financial supporter of Calder House, we need to correct several statements before any investor, board member, or guest leaves with false information." A restless sound moved through the room. Blythe stepped closer. "This is highly inappropriate." Rowan looked at her. "So was pressuring my client into signing a premarital agreement at a dinner table." "We will keep this brief and factual." Nora saw a few heads turn. The old humiliation had entered the room again, but this time it was not controlling her. It was evidence of a pattern. Rowan opened the folder. First, he said. Mrs. Calder has not agreed to invest trust assets into Calder House. Dean's jaw tightened. Second, Rowan continued, no one at this event is authorized to represent her trust as a funding source for company debt, expansion plans, or investor reassurance. A board member near the front slowly lowered his glass. Rowan placed another page on the podium. Third, the Calder board is being formally notified through counsel of unauthorized or unsupported payments connected to consulting work, hospitality expenses, and vendor accounts. Lacey stood halfway. Her chair scraped against the floor. Rowan did not raise his voice. Ms. Vale, relevant documentation will be provided through the appropriate legal channels. Lacey froze. The people near her leaned away, not dramatically, but enough for her to feel the distance. Dean stepped toward Nora. Please, not here. Nora finally looked at him. You taught me that public humiliation is acceptable when the family thinks it has power. He had no answer. Rowan continued. Fourth, there are written communications discussing public pressure tactics against my client after similar pressure was used before the wedding. Blythe's smile vanished. Fifth, Rowan said, there are communications discussing a plan for Mrs. Calder to invest as a wife rather than as a lender, which would reduce outside oversight and increase emotional pressure. The room shifted. That sentence changed everything. Investors understood it. Board members understood it. Even the guests who knew nothing about finance understood enough. Dean had not just cheated, he had planned. Nora's heart ached, but her voice stayed steady when she spoke again. I was called a gold digger before I became a wife, she said. Tonight I discovered I was the vault they were trying to reach. The words landed like glass breaking. No one clapped. No one laughed. No one even moved. Lacey lowered herself back into her seat, her face empty of color. The polished consultant mask had cracked in front of the exact people she had wanted to impress. Harlan covered his mouth with one trembling hand. Ross looked down at the table as if he had never made a joke in his life. Blythe turned toward Nora, fury finally breaking through her control. You ungrateful little... Nora faced her fully. Careful, Blythe, she said. The next folder is yours. Blythe stopped. The room went so quiet that the microphone picked up her uneven breath. For the first time, the woman who had once placed a prenup beside Nora's dinner plate had nothing to say. Nora placed the microphone back on the stand. She did not smile. She did not cry. She only looked at Dean one last time before stepping away from the podium. And as Rowan closed the black folder, every person in that ballroom understood the same thing. The exposure was not over. It had only begun. The Calder name came down 6 weeks later. 2 workers stood in the front lobby of Calder House, unscrewing the gold letters from the marble wall while employees watched in silence. One letter fell harder than the rest and struck the floor with a sharp sound that echoed through the building. Dean sat alone behind the glass wall of the main conference room. No tie, no speech, no investors waiting to shake his hand. Just a silent phone, a stack of legal notices, and the reflection of a man who had spent years believing his family name could protect him from consequences. It could not. By the morning after the anniversary dinner, the board had opened an internal review. Within days, investors paused funding talks. Within 2 weeks, the bank refused to extend Calder House's credit line because the company had overstated its stability and hidden pressure from unpaid vendors. The expansion deal collapsed. Vendors demanded payment. Employees began asking whether payroll was safe. The company card charges Dean had used for hotel rooms were now part of the board review. The unsupported consulting bonuses paid to Lacey were now documented. The inflated $10 million image Blythe had protected like a crown was now a liability. Calder House had not fallen because Nora shouted. It fell because the truth had paperwork. Dean pressed both hands to the conference table. For months he had told himself that everything could be fixed if Nora just helped, if she invested, if she forgave, if she stayed quiet, if she acted like the wife he needed instead of the woman he had wounded. Now he understood the cruelest part. Nora had stayed quiet for a long time. That was why the evidence was so complete. Across town, Lacey tried to call 3 clients before noon. None answered. One sent a short message. Given current developments, we are pausing all consulting relationships. Another simply removed her from a scheduled campaign call. Her name had once opened doors because she looked polished, useful, and close to power. Now every whisper connected her to unsupported payments, hotel records, and a public scandal that had embarrassed people far richer than her. She had wanted Nora's place. Instead, she inherited the shame she helped create. At the Calder House, Blythe sat in the formal living room surrounded by unpaid bills, unopened envelopes, and flowers from people who had suddenly stopped visiting. The same women who once laughed at Nora over champagne now sent short, cold texts, thinking of you. Such a difficult time, we should reschedule lunch. They would not reschedule, Blythe knew it. Power had made her cruel, losing power made her invisible. She tried to fight back the only way she knew how. She called a society columnist and claimed Nora had destroyed the family because Dean rejected her emotionally. She called Nora bitter, vindictive, dangerous. She said wealth had made Nora cold, but Rowan was ready. He released one controlled legal statement. No insults. No emotional language, no long defense. Mrs. Calder's claims are contradicted by documented financial misconduct, unauthorized or unsupported payments, and written attempts to pressure Ms. Wren into funding Calder liabilities. That was all. Blythe could not fight facts without inviting more facts, and there were more. In Rowan's office, Nora sat at a polished table with divorce papers in front of her. The room was quiet, too quiet almost. After so much humiliation, betrayal, and exposure, she expected victory to feel louder. It did not. It felt like setting down something heavy after carrying it so long she had forgotten the shape of her own hands. Rowan placed a pen beside the documents. The fair premarital agreement we drafted before the wedding protects the trust completely, he said. Separate assets remain separate. No claim reaches Etta's trust. No Calder debt attaches to you. Nora looked at the page. The prenup had been the first weapon they used against her. The fair agreement Rowan drafted afterward had become the shield that saved her. There was poetry in that, but it did not make the pain beautiful. It only made the lesson clear. People who try to trap you with paper should be careful what paper you learn to carry. Nora signed. Her married name looked strange beneath her hand. For a moment she remembered Dean at the altar, tears in his eyes, promising never to let her feel alone beside him again. She had believed him because she wanted to believe love could become braver after shame. But love that needed her silence to survive was not love. It was control wearing a softer voice. That evening, Dean came to Rowan's office without an appointment. He looked ruined, not just tired. Ruined in the way a man looked when every mirror in his life had finally stopped lying to him. Rowan moved to refuse him, but Nora said, "It's all right." Dean stepped inside. For a long moment he only looked at her. His eyes were red, his hands trembled. "I loved you," he said. Nora did not answer quickly. She owed herself the full truth now. "You loved the version of me who made you feel safe," she said. "You punished the version of me who had power." Dean's face twisted. "Lacey meant nothing." Nora's voice stayed soft. "She meant enough for you to risk me." "Down, I was ashamed," he whispered. "After the dinner, after everyone knew about the trust, I felt small. I didn't know how to stand beside you anymore." Nora's eyes filled, but she did not let the tears fall yet. "So you stood beside the woman who helped make me look dangerous for being stronger than you." Dean covered his face. "Was there ever a chance after the hotel?" he asked. Nora remembered the open door, Lacey's laugh, the briefcase, the post-nuptial proposal. The way Dean had looked afraid, not because she was hurt, but because she had found the plan. "There was a chance after the prenup," she said. "I gave it to you, you spent it." That ended him more completely than anger could have. Dean did not beg after that. Maybe he finally understood that begging was only another way to ask Nora to carry his consequences. He left with his shoulders bent. Nora watched him go and felt grief move through her, but it did not pull her back. Later, Rowan drove her to Etta's old office. The building smelled like paper, lemon oil, and memory. Nora had not been there since before the wedding. Etta's desk still sat near the window. Her plain cardigan still hung on the back of the chair, protected under clear cover. Rowan opened a locked drawer and removed a sealed envelope. "Your grandmother left this," he said. "It was only to be opened if your marriage ended." Nora took it with shaking fingers. Inside was one folded page. Etta's handwriting crossed it in careful lines. "If they made you feel small, become too whole to fit inside their story." Nora pressed the letter to her chest. Then she finally cried, not because Dean was gone, because the version of her that begged to be chosen was gone too. And outside the office window, morning light touched the city as if something new had already started without asking permission. The applause was so loud that Nora almost stepped back. For 1 second, standing beneath the sunlight pouring through the renovated glass roof, she felt the old fear return. The fear of being watched, the fear of being judged, the fear of standing in front of people who might decide she was too small, too quiet, too hidden, or too powerful to be loved. Then a little girl in the front row lifted a book above her head and shouted, "Miss Nora, we did it." The crowd laughed gently. Nora breathed again. This was not a ballroom full of people waiting to use her. This was not a dinner table with a leather folder and cruel smiles. This was not a hotel corridor or an attorney's office or a stage where Dean had tried to turn her silence into money. This was the new Etta Wren Center for Women and Children, and it belonged to something better than revenge. Months had passed since Calder House collapsed under the weight of its own documents. The divorce was final. The trust was untouched. The fair premarital agreement Rowan had drafted had done exactly what it was meant to do. It protected Nora from the debts, lies, and greed of a family that once thought paper could trap her. Now she used different paper: scholarship letters, training certificates, employment contracts, business grants for women rebuilding after betrayal. The center was bright and wide, with reading rooms, classrooms, counseling offices, and a small business wing for women learning how to manage money after divorce, fraud, or financial control. On one wall, in simple gold letters, were the words, "The Etta Wren Center for Women and Children." Below the name was a smaller line from Etta's favorite saying, "Real power does not need to enter loudly." Nora stood in front of that wall wearing her grandmother's pearl bracelet, but this time she had paired it with a tailored white suit. She still looked graceful, still simple, still Nora, but she was no longer hiding to make other people comfortable. Rowan stood near the side of the room, quiet and proud. He did not clap loudly, he never did anything loudly, but when Nora looked at him, he gave a small nod that said more than applause could. Near the back were several former Calder employees. Not Dean, not Blythe, not the ones who lied or stole or helped cover up the truth. These were assistants, clerks, junior managers, and office staff who lost jobs when the company fell. Nora had reviewed their records before hiring them. She knew who had followed orders because they were afraid and who had used power because they enjoyed it. She had punished guilt. She had not punished need. That was the difference between justice and cruelty. Dana Marsh, a 41-year-old business reporter covering the opening of Nora's new center after following the Calder House collapse, lifted a microphone as Nora stepped away from the ribbon cutting. "Ms. Wren," Dana asked, "after everything that happened with the Calder family, do you consider this revenge?" The room became very quiet. Nora looked toward the children sitting cross-legged near the reading corner. She thought of the first charity event, when she tied Milo's shoe while rich guests stepped around her like she was staff. She thought of Blythe calling her useful, Dean calling her quiet strength, Lacey turning friendship into a weapon. Then she looked back at Dana. "No," Nora said, "revenge would have been me trying to hurt them. I only stopped protecting them from the truth." The answer moved through the room like a soft wave. No shouting, no insult, no victory dance. Just the kind of sentence that did not need to be repeated because everyone would remember it anyway. Far away, in a small rented office, Dean watched the clip on an old laptop. His tie was loose, his desk was plain, his family name no longer opened doors. He worked under another man now, doing reports that no one praised him for. On the screen, Nora smiled as children surrounded her with books and flowers. He watched her speak to donors, former employees, mothers, and girls who looked at her with respect. For the first time, he understood the truth fully. Nora had never been small. He had only needed her to be small so he could feel big. He closed the laptop before the clip ended, but that did not close the ache inside him. Elsewhere, Lacey tried to rebuild herself online. She posted polished photos. She changed her professional bio. She called herself a brand strategist, a crisis consultant, a woman who knew how to reshape narratives. But every search of her name found the same shadow: Calder House, unsupported payments, affair scandal, public exposure, false consulting bonuses. The world she had tried so hard to enter no longer trusted her near its doors. She had wanted Nora's place. Instead, she became known for the things she tried to hide. Blythe's fall was quieter. The Calder estate sold without a public announcement. The woman who once mocked Nora's simple dress now avoided charity events, private lunches, and cameras. She had protected a fake empire so fiercely that she lost the real things first: respect, influence, and the son who no longer knew how to defend her. Back at the center, Nora sat in a reading circle with the children. She opened one of Etta's favorite books. The pages were worn at the edges, the cover soft from years of use. She read slowly, giving every word room to breathe. A little girl with braids raised her hand. "Miss Nora?" "Yes." "Were you scared?" Nora smiled gently. "Yes." The girl tilted her head. "What did you do?" Nora looked down at the pearl bracelet on her wrist. For a moment, she felt Etta beside her, not as a memory that hurt, but as a strength that stayed. I remembered who I was, Nora said, before they told me who to be. The little girl seemed to think about that seriously. Then she nodded, as if Nora had given her something she might need one day. Later, when the opening ended and the cameras were gone, Nora walked alone through the new center. Sunlight spilled across the floor. Children's voices echoed from the reading rooms. Women stood in the business wing, filling out forms for scholarships and training grants. Former Calder employees answered phones, helped families, and began again. Nora's footsteps were calm. There were no desperate calls behind her, no dinner table waiting to shame her, no husband asking her to shrink, no friend pretending betrayal was concern, no mother-in-law measuring her worth by what she could take or give. The same woman they laughed at over a prenup now owned the room without needing to announce it. Dean had lost his company. Lacey had lost her mask. Blythe had lost her throne. And Nora had gained what Etta always wanted for her, a life where her heart and her power could finally stand in the same place. At the end of the hall, Nora stopped before Etta's name on the wall. For a second, the sunlight touched the pearl bracelet like a promise. Nora smiled. Then she opened the door to the next classroom, where another child was waiting to read. If this story moved you, remember this: never let anyone shame you into signing away your peace.